Welcome back to the latest edition of The Audible presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Bruce Feldman, joined by my colleagues from The Athletic, Ralph Russo and Stuart Mandel. Guys, a lot to get to. We have a Heisman Trophy winner. I don't know if it's a Heisman Trophy controversy that came out of it in the hours after the announcement. And there's the Michigan story. The Michigan story has dominated not just the college football news, but it's bigger than that because it has been so messy and it is sprawling out into a lot of different areas. We're going to get into that. Guys, it's an interesting weekend we've had. Let's start with the Wolverines, though.
Yeah, it looks like Michigan may. What's interesting about Michigan's coaching search, before we get into the Sherrone Moore of it all, is we have one less clear candidate now, right? A lot of people had thought about Kellen DeBoer and at Alabama possibly being a candidate eventually at Michigan, in the way he was thought of as a possible candidate eventually at Penn State. But that's gone now, Stu. Kellen DeBoer has said he's staying at Alabama.
Yeah, and then you look at some of the other people. I think Kenny Dillingham has been a hot name there. There's been reports that he might be nearing some sort of raise or extension at ASU. Our guy Kyle Whittingham announced he was stepping down on Friday at Utah for 21 years, which in any other coaching carousel would be maybe one of the bigger movements of the cycle, but not so much. Then mentions of possibly him entering the mix there. I'm interested, obviously, in who the next coach is going to be, guys. But also, I believe when you and Bruce you guys came on and talked about the Michigan stuff, whenever that was, late last week.
I think it was Thursday when we taped, I believe. Yeah.
We had, so that was Thursday. So on Friday morning.
The day before the arraignment.
On Friday morning, I'm not sure I can remember anything quite so surreal as tuning into a hearing from a courtroom in Michigan and seeing the guy who coached Michigan in the Ohio State game not that long ago, sitting alone in a cell in a jail uniform, handcuffed. It just kind of hammered home to me the severity of this story. I've seen people, especially when it first happened, grouping this with, another Michigan man, another supposed Michigan man. I'm like, guys, this is not Connor Salyans stealing schemes. This is not something that happened in a game. This is about as serious as it gets. You have a coach who, had this affair, but then ended up he got fired. And by that night, he's in jail. And then we find out what the charges were, allegedly going into that woman's apartment, making some pretty serious threats. He's charged with stalking, breaking and entering. And Bruce, I want to turn it to you here because you've been doing some reporting on this, and it pretty quickly turned to, okay, now we're investigating the entire athletic department.
Yeah, I think when this first came out, when they announced that he was getting fired for cause, and I think a bunch of us had heard rumors of this for a while, right? But then as it started to unfold, this took on a much darker turn, right? And I think so for a lot of people, especially, people on the internet, it's this feels like Bobby Petrino. This actually doesn't feel like the Bobby Petrino story. It's way darker. Somebody inside the University of Michigan program a couple of days ago described it as tragic. And I think there's just a lot of layers to this where what we're getting into our reporting is at The Athletic is going to be this. It wasn't the old question of what did the people at Michigan, what did, Warde Manuel, the AD, what did he know and when he knew it? It's starting to feel more like, why didn't he know more about this? There's definitely a lot of disturbing things we are hearing at The Athletic from the people we're talking to that are now connected to this investigation. And again, there's another level of this investigation, but the initial one was it seemed to be very small, and it seemed to be very self-contained, and until, as we reported, until middle of last week, I think when somebody else came forward, there was almost felt like there was nothing they could do about it. And I think where schools get into really, really hot water is, you go back to the Baylor scandal when it becomes about, the Title IX reporting and how was it handled right now. I mean, this is the thing that now I think more stuff we would expect to come to light about how this was handled. And it's been a pretty wild couple of days. And I think that the one thing I would say to this, Ralph, is I would be surprised if Warde Manuel, the AD, is going to be the AD much longer because of the handling of a lot of this and just how disturbing and how many layers there is to this story involving the head coach at the University of Michigan. Again, this is like, there's a bunch of stuff that now is coming to light where you're like, how did more people not step in on this?
Yeah, even before you guys started rolling through your reporting, I think there was a thought that, boy, a lot of stuff has gone wrong under Warde Manuel's watch. And even though they had some great success in football, there just seems to be a lot of stuff piling up here. And then you have the Sherrone Moore scandal. I don't know what other word to put with it, and the unanswered questions about that. And you couldn't help but think to yourself, Michigan kind of needs to do a little self-evaluation here, right? Like Michigan needs to kind of look at itself in the mirror here and say, what are we doing inside this athletic department? And generally speaking, once you do that, the people at the head of those institutions often end up on shaky ground. So even as soon as this stuff sort of like, I shouldn't say calm down, but we had a handle on what was going on in there, you could already see like, this might not work out great for Warde Manuel. And now with wheels in motion, it becomes more and more apparent. The coaching search is not the most important thing in the world, but it's the most important thing that we can talk about because we can speculate on this a little bit more freely. And when you have questions about who is going to be making a hire and how a coaching search is going to be done, that leads to the question of like, when are they going to actually do this coaching search? And is this something where the board steps in, or like, how do you go about doing an internal investigation that could impact who's leading your department at a time? And by the way, you also have an interim president at Michigan. So I guess the question, and I don't think there's a good answer to this, Stu, is Michigan going to have to put this search on hold for a couple of weeks? And what does that mean to the candidate pool?
Yeah, well, from your guys talking to people, like, is Warde Manuel the one hiring the coach? Is he on the shelf pending this investigation? What if the investigation takes months? Like,
any indication of that, Bruce?
I don't know how Warde Manuel could be the one doing the hiring here. I really, that would surprise me based on some of the things I've already heard. Again, not to get into the weeds too much, but obviously we know the transfer portal is about to open in, 17 days or something like that, if my math's correct.
Feels like unofficially it's already open.
Yeah, and you're right, Stu. You're right. It already has unofficially opened up, right? You have a lot of really good young players. I know that obviously Bryce Underwood's the big ticket item, literally on cost and everything else. Where does that go going forward? They're going to play Texas, I think, December 31st in a bowl game. And right now, Biff Poggi is the interim head coach. I mean, he was the interim for a couple of games that they won when Sherrone. The other thing is there's so many layers of the Sherrone kind of saga. And it's, he was going to even be suspended a game next year if he didn't get fired from some of his NCAA dealings or misdoings. And so there's just a lot of pieces of this. I don't know what, like how Michigan goes forward too fast on this, right? Because there can be almost no alignment here when you're talking about who's going to be the AD or not. We can talk about the search, right? Like, to go back a couple of steps, you guys are talking about Kellen DeBoer, and I think we all have a ton of respect for him. And Ralph, you and I had talked about this in the Penn State reporting. Like, he was not a candidate there, and he had no interest. And there was, from what we were told, no one had contacted Penn State with DeBoer or anybody close to him about the job. What I had, when our search story went up Friday about this job, there were 5 candidates that I included. DeBoer was one of them, was the first name. Biff Poggi's there because he's immensely well thought of inside Michigan, and the players are connected to him. And if there is a feeling of, well, they're in limbo for, an extensive amount of time, Poggi is probably the best option there for that. And then there was like, okay, is Jedd Fisch a real factor in this search? I think he will be. He was there under Harbaugh. People like him. He's a really good offensive coach, and he did an amazing job at Arizona. Now just led Washington to 9 wins in his second season there. But on DeBoer, so I go on Paul Feinbaum's show. I think I've done Feinbaum's show probably over 100 times in my life, probably more than that. And it's the first time I ever asked Paul a question while the interview was going on. And because he brought up, we were talking about DeBoer, and I said, let me ask you something. If they lose the opening round game at Oklahoma, like, I get it. He's, who's going to say as they're about to play in a playoff game, yeah, I'm going to give oxygen to this. So Paul, you know how you can be. I mean, you don't think it's going to, if they lose, there's not going to be a dramatic stirring up of the Alabama fan base that's already probably going to be ticked off depending on how that game plays out. Now, I'm not diminishing it, because I think there's another thing. And I think, Ralph, you might have brought this up online. Let's say somehow Michigan is really interested in DeBoer, and there's discussions. If you're Alabama, the last thing you want to do, whether you win the game or not, is go through your own coaching search, right? Because I don't know who you're Alabama and think, oh, we're going to, who wants to do a coaching search right now after the carousel the way it is?
I think we agree. Greg Byrne is not firing Kellen DeBoer, even if he loses the first round playoff game. The fans might not be happy with him. He's not going to, he's not going to fire Greg, So I think the idea was, well, he could just get out ahead of it, right? Not have to deal with this next year, maybe. But I don't.
But why would Michigan at this, the state of Michigan, not the state of Michigan, but the state of the Michigan football program and Michigan athletics doesn't seem like one you'd want to run to right now. And if you're looking for an off ramp, Stu, why would Michigan necessarily in the current state be that for not just DeBoer, but for anybody, Stu?
Well, I think you can look at it one of two ways. I mean, it's Michigan. People are going to want to coach at Michigan. It's the one of the absolute blue bloods. I made the mistake of saying with Kiffin, with LSU, like, that place is such a mess right now. The governor, nobody's going to want that job. And of course, that's the job Lane took. So you could theoretically have that, somebody who just really wants to coach the maize and blue. But nothing against Jedd Fisch. Congratulations on that LA Bowl route. I think he's a good coach. But if we're talking about him as the best they can do right now, then maybe you think about doing what Stanford did. Okay, Biff will be the coach for the next year. And then we'll do a real coaching search. By then we'll have a president, probably a new AD. But I don't know. I mean, you can do that at Stanford. I don't know if at Michigan, major program, Big Ten, you can put your whole program on hold for a year.
Especially when you got a guy like Bryce Underwood sitting there. Like, I mean, you've got this number. When do you think
Bryce Underwood's going to stay then?
Well, but even if he does stay, because we're gonna put Biff Poggi into place, and maybe he has a relationship with Biff, but like, you also want to maximize Bryce Underwood, right? Yeah, you have him for 3 years. Like, the idea that we're just going to put a Band-Aid over this and we'll see what happens next year. They were going to be messing with the staff anyway and looking for new.
That's what I was going to say. I could see him making changes.
Right, but how are you going to bring in elite coordinators, no offense to Biff, to work for Biff Poggi, knowing that, this guy's not going to be the coach next year. Like, it's just really hard to do that. It's just really hard.
I don't think that's as hard as you think it is because look at it this way. If you have money, and we know Michigan has a ton of money, people went to work for Brian Kelly, by the way, knowing that, guys go to work for coaches on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Or less than ideal. Sorry. I mean, don't overthink that. I'm telling you, there are guys who, if they said, we're going to pay you $2 million and you get to coach Bryce Underwood.
Fair.
I think that I would not, again, I would expect maybe you'll have changes in both coordinators there if it comes to that.
Let's get a quick break in and we'll be right back. Okay, should we pivot to other quarterbacks and what they might do and what we found out today?
Good segue, Ruffles.
Yeah, portal season is very much upon us, even though the thing doesn't actually open until early January. So in the last few days, few hours, the headliner, of course, is we talked about Bryce Underwood as a number 1 overall recruit. Well, Dylan Raiola was a number 1 overall recruit. It was a big freaking deal when he went to Nebraska, sort of following his lineage, right? He's got an uncle who played in Nebraska. Yeah. Well, Dylan hurt himself during the season, or didn't hurt himself, but was injured during the season, a serious injury, broke his leg. And now he's jumping in the transfer portal, Stu. So it was Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway from Florida. Saw something about it, like actually,
Brendan Sorsby from Cincinnati.
Yeah, it was Brendan Sorsby. I've been busy writing a story, so I thought I heard that one too.
Three, he might not be as big a name. He had the best season of those three this past year, right?
And you throw in Sam Leavitt, who's already been, sort of out there. I don't think he is officially announced, but I mean, it's all but been announced through Kenny Dillingham that Sam Leavitt's going into the portal. So we've already got a pretty interesting crop of quarterbacks who are going to be on the market this year. I guess let's just start with Raiola, Bruce, because it was such a big deal when he went to, I mean, we had people like our buddy Ari and even us to a certain degree. I think all thought of that as like, oh, that's good for college football that he doesn't go to Georgia, that he goes to Nebraska. And it just never really ended up being that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, look, his uncle was the O-line coach, right? You said his dad also played there. Mm-hmm. There's definitely history. Look, he was a true freshman last year. They didn't have much around him. Then this season, I think he took a step forward with Dana Holgorsen. He didn't take a huge step forward. Yeah, he definitely got better. And then he got hurt at, basically at mid-season. I'm curious what his next move is. I think he's really talented. I know people are kind of weird about him because of the Mahomes stuff with him, which is kind of, they find a little weird too.
There was a funny tweet about if he transfers to Texas Tech, we may have to have an intervention. I don't know who said that, and I'm sorry.
Somebody deserves credit
taking
for
your
that
joke. Yeah, I'm sorry for taking your joke.
I went back and looked because I was trying to remember who else was in his class. So 2 years ago, I remember going to the Elite 11. There were 20 quarterbacks invited there. Sayan and Raiola were probably the two most impressive there, definitely. And already 13 of them, of the 20, are in the portal or have already transferred, like Julian Sayan. 13 of the 20. And when you look at the number, I was like, I would actually not be surprised if it was 19 of the 20 end up playing someplace else at some point in their college career. I think CJ Carr at Notre Dame might be the only one who ends up staying the whole time at one school. I mean, it's crazy, but that's the climate we're in. I'm curious, again, this is also a function of players are free agents every year. Every player on your roster is a free agent. And is this just going to be the nature of things? I mean, Stu, if I made you the GM, and again, you're the GM for 1 year, whether you have a fifth-year quarterback or, it's going to be year 3 for Raiola, like, who is, and include Leavitt. Leavitt looked,
Leavitt's my choice. If you're asking me which one I take, it's Leavitt.
Give me the order. Give me the order, Stu.
The guy led a team to the Big 12 title, to almost as close as you can possibly come to beating Texas in the playoff. Wasn't quite as productive this year, but obviously not having Cam Scatterby probably changed the way defenses approach them.
So Leavitt's one. Then where do you have Raiola? Where do you have Sorsby? Where do you have Lagway?
I think I have Raiola next. You know, the challenge with these 5-star guys is like somebody's probably going to overpay drastically for DJ Lagway because of who he was supposed to be and completely overlooked that he just wasn't very good this past year. I know there were other problems on Florida. But in terms of like, at this point, you should be going on their track record more so than recruiting. So I actually think I would go, Raiola second, call me crazy, Sorsby third, Lagway fourth.
I'll buy that. Here's a good question. Give me some. If we're brainstorming places where these guys could land, I saw somebody saying, "Well, Oregon, because all of a sudden Dante Moore, that guy might be a top 10 draft pick, right?" We're getting to the point with Dante Moore where I think there was an assumption that he would stay 2 years because it would help his development. I think it's still 50-50. Honestly, I can't, but the quarterback class is not looking quite so robust. In other quarterback news over the weekend, Lenora Sellers announced that he was, I don't know if he announced, there was a report that he was getting close to staying at South Carolina. That's important because it takes him off the NFL board, not just the transfer market, but the NFL board. So who are the top? Because that's there's 3 different paths for these guys, right? It's get in the portal, stay, go to the NFL draft. That's the combination of decision tree that's being made here with a lot of these quarterbacks. So when I start thinking about the guys who have jumped in the portal, now Raiola couldn't have gone to the NFL. He's too young for that. And same thing with Lagway. But you start wondering, like, who needs a quarterback? Okay, who needs one? Like among contenders and among are these guys going to land in places where they are being asked to drop into a playoff contender and be a star immediately? And
I'll give you 2.
Okay,
I'll give you 2. And to be clear, I don't know who's talking to who's tampering with.
We're all
none
speculating.
Of that, right?
We're all speculating.
But I would just think for any of these guys, 2 very attractive ones would be Indiana, because look what they just did for Mendoza, right? He wasn't like he was this kind of quarterback at Cal. And Texas Tech, because they're going to pay you a ton of money. And they're a good team.
Signetti, I'm sorry to cut you off, Bruce, but Signetti brings this up all the time. He was asked it at the Heisman ceremony the other night. He brings it up all the time. Everybody we've ever brought in has been Conference Player of the Year. Everybody we've ever, and this is going back to I think Elon. And he's right. They are really good at quarterback development at IU.
Yeah. Talk your talk, Signetti. You earned it. You backed it up. And I think from this, the Oregon one to me is interesting because, again, this goes back to early October. Talked to somebody pretty connected to Dante Moore's situation. And they were like, he is not in any rush to get to the NFL. They want to fully develop. This is his first year as a starter. Even if he is going to be a top 10 pick, and there's no saying for sure, between now and January, what that's going to look like. But we're in a different era right now where Oregon can pay him, or a lot of places could pay him a lot of money to be like, okay, instead of just getting the career-ending insurance or the career-altering insurance, now there's a financial component. The other thing that makes it certainly more complicated, Ralph, and I know you brought this up a few minutes ago, is about the decision of draft or stay. For a lot of guys, Sam, use the example of Sam Hartman. You're not going to be a first-round pick. You can make a lot of money as maybe as a mid-round talent by staying another year.
No doubt.
And I think that will be interesting remember, the first pick in the draft this past year, Cam Ward, he was projected as a 5th-round pick. He went to Miami
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mendoza, who might be the number 1 pick. Mendoza might be the number 1 pick. He could have gone in the NFL last year, but I don't even know if that was a consideration. He wasn't regarded that way. I don't think it was. And also, right now, I think what we have to keep in mind, guys, is these draft projections in December 15th
are wildly speculative right now. And I think so. Oh, he's going to be the first pick in the draft. He's going to be top. I would pump the brakes on a lot of that, but that's the challenge for a lot of these players have to do right now is figure out what's real, what's kind of real, and what's not.
We forgot the most obvious team, right? And that is Miami. He brought Cam Ward, but they've gone from Cam Ward to Carson Beck, who, did a nice job of elevating
also
his status.
Who everybody thought was going to turn pro.
Yeah.
Decided to go in the portal instead.
But he was also like, his situation was a little bit like, he was coming off an injury, wouldn't have been able to throw for anybody. So I think that clouds it a little bit. Go ahead, Ralph.
But I will pencil in one of those four guys at Miami, right? Like if you look at Leavitt, Sorsby, Lagway, and Raiola, one of those four guys is going to be at Miami, right? Because they have such an obvious. There will be more, but I don't know if there's going to be more substantially better than those four. And Miami has a glaring need, and I don't think they've got like the guy behind him. I'd have to look at the depth chart, so I'm probably sliding somebody.
But what you could sell, what you could sell
year, right?
Is Shannon Dawson still the offensive coordinator?
Probably. Malachi Tony's still there.
That's it. You have Malachi Tony. You're going to have a good offensive line.
Yeah,
2 points.
Because Mario, recruits great offensive lines. They got the youngest of all those running backs. Yeah, Miami should be good again next year.
2 points. One, just looking up the rookie salaries here. We know there were college QBs this year who were making close to $4 million. I don't know if we ever confirmed anybody was making $4 million. Jackson Dart went 25th in the draft last year and is making $4.2 million. So these guys can do almost as well as they would. Certainly if they don't make the first round. Right now, it's only 1 year. It's not, you're not getting a 4-year contract.
That's the thing. Yeah.
But that's
also one other piece of this too on the Jackson Dart thing. That's his NFL contract, 4.2. If you're the quarterback in New York, especially him, you're going to be making a lot of money outside of your NFL salary.
But you could also get drafted by Cleveland, so there's no.
Well,
I know, but but again.
Darian Mensah, by the way, is also, I'm sorry to cut you, but like John Talty from CBS had also reported this afternoon when we talk about the NFL, Darian Mensah might be considering going to the NFL. He actually played really well this year, like some turnovers. But again, that would open up another spot, right? Duke has shown they will throw money propensity, around. Yeah, that hey, it wants to be in the game, so maybe that's another spot for somebody.
And
else.
I would predict it's more likely than not that he will go in the NFL, just because I know that was kind of on the radar from the beginning. No, I'm going to ask you guys, since you said Ralph. Well, I don't know if there's going to be any more like high profile guys like this. If Bryce Underwood did go in the portal,
oh sure,
how would your order change?
Oh boy, I don't know if it would change. I mean, it was really your order. I don't think I used an order. I would. I don't know if Underwood, is there that much difference between Underwood and Lagway? Like those are the guys I think of as comps.
Underwood, I think,
super
is
high
probably
ceiling,
a better athlete. Yeah, but he's really raw. Really raw. I'm not going to push back too much on what Stu said before. The one thing I will say about it is, that is a really tough situation for a true freshman quarterback to go into, where they feel like you have to be the savior for the coach who you have a relationship with. Like he's really liked Billy Napier. So they're trying to save Billy Napier's job in 2024. And then in 2025, you have like Dallas Wilson is probably one of the five most talented receivers in college football, but Dallas Wilson's hurt. There's again, not making huge excuses for him, but I think the circumstance there was different than it is for he and Raiola are the same age. It's just, I kind of feel for him in that regard. And it's all what you think you can get out of guys. I think systems are different. I'd be fascinated who ends up in Indiana with Cignetti based off of what we've seen and RPOs, and Mendoza makes great decisions and everything like that. But to see what it looks like going there, I would love to see, and I don't think you'll ever see this, but like the reality show of what the sales pitches to these quarterbacks are, because you'd have that, but then also, we tried to do something a few years ago about what the market was like and who was going to end up where. And I just remembered it was a curveball that Will Howard, who ended up winning the national title for Ohio State, ended up in Columbus from the start of the process to when they got him. So, it's really an interesting shell game.
All right, I think we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, like Bruce said, there was a little late night action after the Heisman ceremony we got to get into. All right, also over the weekend was the Heisman presentation. Fernando Mendoza ended up winning by a considerable margin over Diego Pavia. Jeremiah Love was third. Ralph, you were on the scene, and I think the question most people want to know is, did you go partying afterward with Diego Pavia?
Well, so a couple of interesting things about the Heisman, because it is not a great media event, and God bless the folks at the Heisman. They do the best they can, but it's not it's a TV show, and they do the best they can to sort of help out the media a little bit, but it is what it is. But because I live close, a few subway stops away, I always cover it. And the cool thing that happened this year, after Mendoza wins the award, where that show is being broadcast from, which is Jazz at Lincoln Center, it's about 20 blocks away from a hotel where the media is stationed. And then they bring him to have a news conference with Kurt Cignetti, at the hotel for the rest of us, unwashed media, right?
Wait. They had the media 20 blocks away from where the ceremony was?
Yes. So
wow.
At times it's been across the street. There's another theater, but I think that theater is not operational. They're not using it anymore for whatever reason. So, but the other thing that happened while we were waiting for Mendoza to show up, he had brought, well, he didn't bring, but I had heard that there was a boost, and he had a booster that sort of helped and set up a watch party for about 10 to 12 of his teammates at a steakhouse in Midtown. In fact, I think they showed it on ESPN during the show. They showed the watch party. Those guys came to the hotel, found the media room before Mendoza himself got there, and they were just having a good old time in the back of the room. They were very respectful after the woman from the Heisman said, "Hey guys, can you please just keep it down a little bit? There are people trying to work." But when he came in, he was swarmed. I put a little video of this out on, not a very good one, not a very good quality video, a video of this out on Twitter on Saturday night. And he was swarmed by his teammates. It was a really cool moment that I've never seen. I've been covering the event for 20 years. I'd never seen that many teammates be there to greet the player. It was heartwarming. Indiana, you can kind of see all the stuff that they talk about, how close they are as a team and how that manifests itself. They really do love this guy who's only been there for 1 year. They were, chanting Heisman Doza as they left, as the press conference was done, and they left. So that was really fun and really interesting part of Saturday night. And afterwards, had the opportunity to go meet up with a couple of people from Vanderbilt that I know. They were having a little bit more of a tamer after party. Saw Clark Lee and a few other people. It was a very good event. People were in very good spirits, despite the fact that that Diego Pavia hadn't won. And I got a chance to talk to Diego just for a moment and, sort of congratulate him and said, "Hey, I voted for you," which the three of us actually all voted for him. All I would say is he was very gracious. He was very nice to me. We had a nice short conversation. But you could also tell that he was upset that he didn't win, that he wanted to win. And what I've sort of posited to people is I know afterwards he made some missteps on social media with a post about F the voters and some not nice things to say about Indiana. I would just say this. I don't think you get to where Diego Pavia is as a 5'10" quarterback who is a no-star recruit who becomes the best player in the SEC and the Heisman runner-up if you don't have a chip on your shoulder. So I understand to a certain degree why his personality manifests itself that way, because he always believes he's got swagger. He always believes he's number one, and that's how he's become so good. And it galvanizes his teammates. I talk about the Indiana situation, how cool it was to see all of his teammates around Mendoza. It was a similar situation at this other after party. he's galvanizing to his teammates. His teammates were a lot of them were there to support him and have fun with him and taking pictures with him. So it was a nice moment as well. Again, I understand online it didn't work out very well for Diego later in the night, but I think it was a similar vibe from both Vanderbilt and Indiana contingents of everybody's here to sort of celebrate their leaders.
I want to say, just watching it with my son, we were in a hotel in San Diego for a football tournament this weekend and watched. He loves Pavia. He just, from watching that SEC reality show before the season, it was like Pavia does hot yoga. He wants to do hot yoga. It's like he's kind of sees it. I immense respect for Mendoza. Gave one of the best speeches I've ever heard, and I've followed the Heisman for 20 plus years. The way he finished it, it was true passion and emotion, and it's a great story. And he told his story, and I felt like he was speaking to not just young aspiring football players, but kids about, just keep going. Don't let anything define you when you're when you're younger. Let your dreams define you. And I thought it was great. I voted for Pavia, and I almost feel like we should almost, because it was a landslide win, right? And it was amazing what Mendoza...
Pretty much. Just to give some perspective, it wasn't like one of the all-time landslides, but it was definitely a very comfortable win for Mendoza, and more than I really thought. Yeah, more than I thought.
On the athletic Heisman straw poll that we do with all our staff, it was very close between Mendoza and Pavia, to the point where I thought this could actually be a lot closer than I was expecting, and it definitely was not.
Definitely.
The reason why I voted for Pavia number one, and I had Pavia, Mendoza, and then my third choice was Jeremiah Love. They were a 2-win program at Vandy before he showed up, and then they won 10 games for the first time in school history. His numbers as a passer were really good. I think he was 4th in quarterback rating, put up big numbers. They were really good on third down. They were great in red zone touchdown percentage. He also ran for like over 800 yards and 9 more touchdowns. Like, he ran better as the season went on, even though he took a pounding, right? And again, no slight to Mendoza. I thought he was fantastic. I think some of what, I don't want to say, factored into it a little bit was they were a playoff team last year, right? Mendoza came in, and now they're a team that has a much better chance to win the national title. But it wasn't, again, I just felt like for the impact on the program that Pavia made, the playmaking ability, yes, but also just the force of personality. It's been a loser football program for a long time, and he almost immediately changed that. And I don't know, Stu, I mean, are you surprised at the outcome that it was so one-sided? I mean, the three of us felt very differently.
Yeah, I just surprised it was so lopsided, because our poll has been generally pretty representative, but it's not. When you look at it now, you're like, oh yeah, I mean, 18 million people watched him beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Well, it's still Vanderbilt, right? So it's not like they were in the ABC game of the week every week. Like his I don't know that a lot of people saw him. His signature performance really was the Tennessee game at the end, and I don't know how many people even saw that. I had the same exact ballot as Bruce. I swear we didn't coordinate it. For me, it was more because I think you could make the case of exactly what you said. Like, Pavia totally transformed a cellar dweller program. But if you were going to make an argument to counter that, you might say, well, he didn't beat Oregon and Ohio State. Like he was, we know Vandy's schedule wasn't the greatest. For me, it was just that he's a runner too, right? Like, they both had great seasons as a passer. Mendoza's arguably a little bit better. But he ran for almost 900 yards too, right? He's one of these guys who, he was the whole offense, basically, him and his tight end. And so whether it was, going back to Tebow, RG3, Manziel, like, I've always had a thing, I think, for the guys who are dual threat.
He's also, and Bruce, just to put an exclamation mark on your point, he is a force of nature who very much changes the culture of the program and changes the mindset of people around him, right? And that's what I'm sort of saying, like that swagger, that edge that sometimes makes him look like maybe, that you kind of go, oh, Diego, please don't do that. But that's also why he's so good. And that's also why that program got so good around him. Like everybody who is associated with Vanderbilt points to that guy as saying, like, he changed the attitude here. Like, he is the guy who made us all believe that we could beat the Alabamas and we could beat like big SEC teams, Tennessee and people like that, because hell, man, he thinks it. So why shouldn't we think it? So, again, he didn't really close the weekend on the highest note, though he did apologize, and that's fine. But again, I just want to sort of describe to people, make people understand. I think the similar parts of his personality that make him great are also the parts of his personality that make him go F the voters, right? When he doesn't win, because he is such a competitive force of nature.
I have a hard time getting indignant about college players doing stuff like that. I know people were greatly offended, but I
didn't care.
Adults make offensive social media comments sometimes, exactly. Or as we were talking about at the beginning of this show, adults do much worse things than that. So him saying F the voters didn't really offend me the way I think it did a lot of people. But it is funny, the contrast. I mean, you could not get a more contrast, right, between him. Somebody we know texted me that night. Mendoza's got to be the nerdiest player ever to win the Heisman, right? Like
I called him nerdy in my story, right? I called him the nerdy and unflappable quarterback, and I was worried that I might offend him or offend people who like him by calling him nerdy. So I sort of asked you guys and some other people, "Hey, you think this is okay?" And everybody was like, "Oh no, that's perfect."
I'm sure he realizes he's nerdy.
Exactly. All right, should we wrap up with a little Notre Dame talk, because that was the story of last week, and the one aspect of the Notre Dame conversation that we never really got into, oddly enough, and it's one of those evergreen. I think I was kidding around last week, and I said on social media, should Notre Dame join a conference is usually a May conversation, and suddenly it's become a December conversation. So after everything sort of died down, and by the way, another thing I got from the Heisman availabilities on Friday, Jeremiah Love was there. They bring in the Heisman candidates and kind of let the reporters talk to them. It's always kind of an interesting mix. It's in New York, so you always have like 3 or 4 New York reporters asking the guys, so you want to play for the Jets and Giants even though they suck?
Were you in the room when Julian Sayin only had one reporter at his table?
Well, they have them there for about 15 minutes, and Sayin had the smallest group for most of the 15 minutes. He wasn't there alone with one reporter for the entire 15 minutes, because I was standing next to him for a little while too and asked him a couple of questions that I thought maybe would be good for playoff conversations, playoff stories later on. But yeah, because I think people understood, like Sayin's probably finishing 4th here. And the other problem is because I think everybody understood, like on the Ohio State beat, that he's probably not winning. Nobody from the Ohio State beat was there. Yeah. So he got some attention, but not that much attention.
By the way, the Heisman media availability, from having covered it a little bit,
sketch, man.
You get some sketchy stuff get asked, because there's New York is not, now there's college football fans there, but it is a different market. And we'll have to talk offline.
There was one guy, I don't know if he's still there, Ralph, because I haven't covered it in probably 10
I'm just going to say yes, he is, and we can.
It's a guy who always asks them what they're majoring in.
Ralph had mentored him.
No, get out of here. He is older than I am.
There was a question. Oh my God. I remember sitting there and I was like, this is amazing. Amazing.
So the one thing that was interesting about Notre Dame out of that availability is I did ask this. So I was a little cautious because I came around to Jeremiah late, and I was like, hey man, I'm sorry if I'm going to ask you something you've been asked earlier. But it's not the most fun thing to ask, to be asked. How did you guys feel about being left out of the playoff? Like, what was the reaction? And I thought he gave an interesting answer in that he said, listen, it was really frustrating and sad at the time, but as a couple of days went by, we realized we put it in the committee's hands because we didn't play enough. We didn't play well enough during the season. Whether you're a Notre Dame fan and you agree with that or not, doesn't necessarily matter. But at least Jeremiah was one of the first people to sort of say, hey, like, yeah, we it stunk. But if we had beaten one of those first two teams at the beginning of the year, we would have made the playoff. Which brings to the conversation again, should Notre Dame join a conference? And, guys, here's the way I always think about that question. One of the reasons why it doesn't happen, because what folks will always say is, well, the conferences should force Notre Dame to join a conference. And they conceivably could by setting up a playoff structure that makes it impossible or very difficult for Notre Dame to get into the playoff without joining a conference. The problem is Notre Dame can only join one conference. So I think if you're the SEC and the Big Ten, and let's just use those two exclusively here, because that would be the obvious destinations, it doesn't behoove you to force Notre Dame into a conference because they might not join yours. If you're the SEC, why would you force Notre Dame into the Big Ten? That helps your competition. If you're the Big Ten, why would you ever give Notre Dame the temptation to jump into the SEC? That would give the SEC an advantage that you don't have. And Stu, I know you love conference realignment, but that's where I'm always at on Notre Dame and why they keep this this status that is unique in college sports, because I don't think anybody wants to drive them into another conference.
I think the only reason they would ever join a conference is if they couldn't get a schedule anymore. If people, and the SEC is going to 9 games, the ACC is going to 9 games. Maybe at some point these conferences go to 10 games. I don't know. And at some point they just can't put a good schedule together. But I don't see that happening because everybody wants to schedule them. Like, who wouldn't want to schedule a home and home with Notre Dame, right? Because when Notre Dame comes to your stadium, it's a really big deal. When Notre Dame went to Georgia, the thing that stood out was they did a home and home with Georgia a few years ago. And when Georgia played at Notre Dame,
I was at that
their fans treated it like a bowl game. They went, right? So in terms of playoff access, it's the opposite. They're not forcing them to get in a conference. They actually have given them some protections in this next contract. Now, the next contract is kind of on hold right now because it covers 12 or 14 teams, the one with ESPN. If they were to go to 16, they kind of have to redo it.
Or more.
They have to redo it. But if it is 12, let's just say it's staying 12 for next year, which is kind of the betting favorite. Like, there are some protections there for them if they finish 12th or higher to get an automatic berth. So they're not making it harder for them. They're making it not easier, but they're making sure they have a spot, basically.
My last word on this is, I think the other part of the conversation about Notre Dame in the conference that came up last week in terms of its like butting heads with the ACC, I do wonder if at some point Notre Dame looks at the ACC and thinks, now, you weren't before, but now because you have been sort of relegated to second tier of the Power Four, now you're hurting us. Now this deal, like this year with Stanford and Syracuse and BC. Now, sometimes that's a little bit of a luck of the draw, right? If they would have gotten Georgia Tech this year, they got Pitt and they got Miami, that was good. If they would have gotten Georgia Tech, that would have been a little better, right? I just wonder if
they would have been better off, Ralph, if they didn't get Miami, if they got Florida State, because then all of a sudden they probably have a better chance of going 11-1.
And then there's that, but I do think that their schedule is getting scrutinized next to Big Ten and SEC schedules, and I do wonder if at some point they look at that as a hindrance to getting into the playoff, as opposed to something that worked for them at another point in time when they wanted to be, again, they're a national brand. They thought playing the ACC, those are like schools, they're private schools, and they're a little more like-minded academically. Plus, it gets us into parts of the country we like to go to. Anyway, without rehashing all of that, I do wonder if now they're in a contract. They're in a contract that runs through like 2036. So I don't know if they could possibly get out of it. But I do wonder if they are now looking at this and thinking, we attached our wagon to the wrong horse here in terms of what we wanted out of a relationship with the ACC. And now its teams aren't as strong as we were hoping they would be.
I mean, that arrangement at the time it went into effect, I think we were still in the BCS, right? So the landscape at that time was there's 5 power conferences. And yeah, people recognize that the SEC was the best, but I don't know that we thought of it, the other ones, that much differently. So you're right. Like now you're only at 4 and there's a huge gap in perception between them. And the ACC did not help their schedule this year, to say the least. I don't know. I think in the end, him saying the ACC did permanent damage, I feel like Notre Dame may have done just as much damage, if not more, to their relationship. I don't think people are happy with them. I also think this is one of those things that, Jim Phillips and him get in a room in February or something and hash it out and everybody moves on.
All right, let's let Stu have the last word on that. We will be back in a few days to get to what we really want to talk about, which is the games that are going to happen in the playoff. Friday, it all kicks off. We will have a lot of analysis and opinion for you guys. We'll also have the mailbag, so be sure to send your questions to theaudiblepod@gmail.com. And we will see you next time.